"You don't belong in first class. Stand up before I call security." The voice sliced through the boarding gate like a blade of cold steel. Sharp, public, humiliating. Heads turned. A hush fell over the line of waiting passengers. The man shouting stood tall, broad-shouldered, his face flushed red with certainty. A platinum boarding pass trembled slightly in his hand as if it were a weapon. His eyes locked onto one target. A black man, dressed simply, standing by the priority boarding lane. The CEO, though no one there knew it yet. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, buzzing like an impatient wasp. The air reeked faintly of stale coffee and disinfectant spray from the cleaning crew that had just finished. Rolling suitcases bumped to a halt as curious onlookers froze. The black man didn't flinch. Not when the insult landed. Not when the stares gathered. His jaw remained still. His grip tightened just once on the worn leather strap of his carry-on. His voice, when it came, was calm, steady. "My ticket says 2A. The white passenger scoffed, his laugh cutting, cruel. "Don't play games. People like you can't afford seats like that. Move before I move you." Gasps rippled through the line. The gate agent shifted uncomfortably but didn't intervene. Not yet. The black man's gaze didn't waver. He said nothing more. Silence, but a silence heavy enough to tilt the air. A woman by the window whispered, "Did he really just say that?" Her phone slipped into her palm almost instinctively. "Sir," the aggressor pressed, his voice louder now so the entire boarding area could hear. "You're holding us all up. Get out of the way." The black man's response was simple. He slid his boarding pass across the counter, one finger tapping the printed name. His voice low, deliberate. "Scan it again." The gate scanner beeped. Green. Yet the pause lingered. The aggressor smirked. The air thickened. The black man's calm didn't crack. His stillness spoke louder than any outburst. Then, a sound that hung like a gavel hitting wood. A chair leg scraped across the floor as someone stood abruptly behind the crowd. The moment froze on that sound. Because what no one knew, not the white passenger, not the gate agent, not the murmuring travelers with phones hovering in half-raised hands, was that the man they tried to humiliate in front of everyone wasn't just another traveler. He was the boss, the owner, the man who, in minutes, would change everything. But for now, he remained silent. And the world mistook his silence for weakness. That mistake was about to cost them everything. The chair scrape echoes. Cut to black. The hum of the boarding gate lingers. Before we dive deeper, before we get into this, let me ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated, judged, or dismissed before you even opened your mouth? That's what just happened at this boarding gate. And the man at the center of it? He isn't who the crowd thinks he is. In a few minutes, everyone watching will discover that the passenger they tried to humiliate isn't just another traveler. He's the CEO, the owner, the man who built the very airline they're standing in line for. But here's the thing. He didn't come dressed in a tailored suit. He didn't flash a watch worth more than a car. He walked up in the plain clothes, a simple carry-on, no fanfare. And because of that, they thought he didn't belong. This story is about what happened next, about how one cruel insult spiraled into something much bigger, and how, within less than an hour, justice was served in front of every stunned witness at Gate C12. But before we dive in, hit like, drop a comment with your city, and subscribe if stories like this make you stop and think. Because trust me, what's about to unfold is going to stay with you. Let's set the scene. The time, 5:42 p.m. The place, Horizon Airlines Chicago O'Hare International Gate C12. Boarding hadn't even begun, and already the gate was on fire. The boarding gate pulsed with the restless energy of travel. Screens above flickered between on time and pre-boarding soon, their blue glow reflecting off tired faces and glossy suitcases. The loudspeaker popped occasionally with half-heard announcements. "Final call for Denver. Passenger Wilson, please report." The smell was a mix of burnt espresso from the kiosk down the hall and faint disinfectant lingering on the armrests. The carpet carried years of footsteps, faded to a dull gray, while the silver poles of the stanchions gleamed under the cold fluorescent light. Some passengers sat hunched over phones, earbuds buried, trying to tune out the chaos. Others tapped shoes impatiently, their boarding passes clutched like passports to another life. A toddler cried somewhere in the distance, a sharp wail that bounced off the glass windows overlooking the runway. Then came the scrape of suitcase wheels as the priority boarding lane began to form. The air shifted. Not quieter, but sharper. Eyes flicked, scanning who belonged where. Lines at airports aren't just lines, they're silent hierarchies, and tonight the invisible borders were about to snap. He stood near the gate, calm, unhurried. Plain black polo. Dark jeans. Well-worn leather shoes, scuffed at the edges but clean. A carry-on bag that had seen its share of continents. To most, he looked like an ordinary traveler. Someone tired, maybe, after a long week. But his stillness gave him away. Where others shifted weight from foot to foot, checked phones nervously, or sighed at delays, he simply stood. Tall, quiet, eyes steady on the boarding screen, as though no one else existed. No designer luggage, no visible watch, no corporate badge dangling on a lanyard. Nothing to announce who he was. Which is exactly how he preferred it. Because this wasn't just another flight. It was a test. Anonymous complaints had been trickling in. Whispers of bias at boarding gates, of passengers being told policy when really what was meant was appearance. Tonight, he chose to see it for himself. But to the crowd, he was just another man in line. And to the white passenger 2 people behind him, he was already a target. The aggressor was impossible to ignore. White, mid-40s, tailored blazer over a golf shirt, shoes polished to a shine. He carried himself with the smug posture of a man convinced the world should move when he spoke. He rolled his silver Rimowa case with a snap of his wrist, cutting into the lane without so much as an "excuse me." His voice carried naturally. Not because he yelled, but because it dripped with the kind of entitlement people rarely challenge. His signature line came fast. "You don't belong here." Not whispered, not muttered. Said full volume, for the gate, the staff, the passengers to hear. Behind the desk, the gate agent shifted in her seat. Her name tag read Miller, early 30s, neat bun, eyes that darted quickly from one screen to another. She didn't say a word, not to stop him, not to defend. Just silence. Her silence was its own form of agreement. Passengers nearby exchanged glances, some uncomfortable, some smirking, 1 or 2 with phones already sliding into their palms. The aggressor's tone set the atmosphere and the staff's passivity sealed it. Whispers rippled through the boarding area. "Did you hear what he said? Don't get involved." A sigh from an older man in business class, a teenager muttering under his breath, typical. The greetings that should have been extended, "Welcome aboard, sir," never came. Instead, sidelong glances, tight smiles, deliberate pauses. The gate agent typed something into her system, slowly, as if waiting for a reason not to scan his ticket. The aggressor leaned closer, voice dripping venom. "Show me your ID." The words hung heavy, more command than request. The crowd stirred. Some leaned in, sensing spectacle. Others looked away, pretending not to hear, though the tension tightened the air like static before a storm. And in that charged silence, one thing was certain. The boundary had been crossed. The storm was about to begin. The white passenger leaned in closer, his voice sharp, deliberate. "Let me see your ID, now." The boarding gate went quiet in patches, like sound dropping out of certain corners. The black man didn't raise his voice. He simply placed his boarding pass flat on the counter, sliding it forward with 2 fingers. The scanner blinked. Green. Valid. But the aggressor wasn't satisfied. "That can't be right," he snapped. "Run it again." The gate agent's lips pressed into a thin line. She hesitated, then scanned it a second time. Again. The green light, steady and unflinching. The black man stood still, his carry-on at his side. His tone was level. "It's valid. May I board?" The aggressor barked a laugh, sharp enough to slice the air. "In those clothes? You're really going to tell me you're in 2A? Who are you kidding?" Passengers behind shifted uncomfortably. A woman clutched her child's shoulder tighter. A businessman glanced at his watch, impatient but unwilling to speak. The denial wasn't about the scanner. It wasn't about the seat. It was about the man standing there. Plain clothes, brown skin, calm defiance. And it was only the beginning. The aggressor's voice grew louder. He turned slightly, projecting to the crowd. "Folks, this guy thinks he's flying first class. Look at him. You believe that?" A ripple of uneasy chuckles came from a few seats in the waiting area. Not many, but enough to sting. The black man didn't move. His jaw stayed relaxed, his hands steady at his sides. "I showed my pass," he said evenly. But the aggressor wasn't done. He stepped half a pace closer, invading space that wasn't his. His words dripped with disdain. "Some people think money buys class, but you can't fake it." Gasps, a few murmurs of protest. A phone camera blinked to life. A red recording light glowed quietly in the corner. The gate agent cleared her throat. "Sir, please step aside." But she wasn't speaking to the aggressor. She was speaking to him, to the black man who hadn't raised his voice once. The crowd shifted. The humiliation wasn't private anymore. It was theater, and the aggressor was feeding on it. The gate agent took his boarding pass. Instead of returning it, she slipped it beneath the counter. The move was small, almost casual, but deliberate. "This pass needs additional verification," she said, her tone clinical, stripped of warmth. The aggressor smirked. "See, even she knows." The black man's eyes lowered to the counter where his ticket had vanished. His voice was quiet. "Return my pass." She shook her head, fingers already tapping at her keyboard. "Policy requires a second form of ID." He placed his driver's license beside her keyboard. She barely glanced before sliding it aside. "This looks questionable." Passengers began whispering. "Questionable?" He gave her ID. "What's going on?" The aggressor leaned against the counter, satisfied. "Probably borrowed it from somebody. Happens all the time." Another staff member joined, a younger agent with clipped speech. "We'll need to escalate this," he said flatly. No one said the word, but it hung there, fawed. The crowd watched as suspicion was manufactured in real time, wrapped in the word policy. The black man's stillness hardened. His voice, low but edged with weight. "You've crossed a line." The phone at the gate agent's desk buzzed. She pressed a button without hesitation. "Security to gate C12. The words echoed through the intercom, amplified to the entire boarding area. Heads snapped up, people pulled out phones. A teenager whispered, "They're calling security on him?" The aggressor folded his arms, triumphant. Finally, minutes stretched thin. Then the heavy footsteps arrived. 2 airport security officers in Navy uniforms walked briskly toward the gate. Their belts clinked with radios, keys, authority. The gate agent gestured toward the black man. "This passenger is attempting to board with a questionable ticket." The officers positioned themselves, one on either side. Not rough, not yet, but presence enough. The black man's voice remained calm. "I purchased this ticket. I showed my ID, twice." One officer's eyes flicked to the screen. The pass still showed valid. But he didn't challenge the staff. Instead, he said, "Sir, you'll need to step aside." The aggressor chuckled, his voice dripping satisfaction. "Told you, doesn't belong." The tension thickened. The security call hadn't calmed the situation. It had escalated it. And now the crowd felt the weight of it. A voice rang out. "This is wrong." It came from a woman seated near the window, phone raised, recording steady. "He showed his pass. You're targeting him for how he looks." Murmurs rippled. Another passenger, middle-aged, stood halfway. "She's right, I saw it scan green." A young man whispered into his phone, live-streaming quietly. "They're harassing a guy with a valid ticket. This is discrimination at gate C12. The crowd was shifting, no longer passive. Some still looked away, but others began leaning forward, eyes narrowed, filming openly. The aggressor's smirk faltered just slightly. The black man finally spoke again, his tone steady but weighted like stone. "You should have let me board." The words weren't shouted, but they landed like thunder. Transition. The officer's hand brushed his shoulder. Not rough, but too familiar. The touch snapped the tension like a live wire, and in that spark the past began to bleed back. The sound of those airport shoes on polished tile blended into another sound, the heavy slam of a drawer, years ago. The officer's footsteps echoed against the tile floor, and suddenly he was 12 again. Back then it wasn't an airport. It was a small-town convenience store. He remembered the smell first, bleach and stale candy, the kind of mix that clung to your clothes even after you left. He had walked in with a $1 bill, saved from mowing lawns. He wanted a comic book, the kind stacked beside the register in plastic sleeves. But the clerk didn't see a boy with $1. He saw something else. "Put that back," the clerk barked. "I didn't take anything," he said. "Don't play dumb. Kids like you don't buy, you steal." The words landed heavy. His fists clenched, but his voice stayed calm. His father arrived minutes later, called from down the street. Tall, weary from work, but unflinching. He didn't yell, he didn't beg. He simply placed his calloused hand on his son's shoulder and said one line the boy would never forget. "Don't fight with noise, fight with truth." The memory ended with the slam of the register drawer. And in the present, the officer's belt jingled the same way. Years later, he was 24. A job interview, his first real shot after grad school. Pressed shirt, shined shoes, resume thick with qualifications. The office smelled of lemon polish and stale coffee. The manager, a man in a gray suit, barely looked at his papers. Instead, his eyes flicked over his clothes, his skin. "We're not sure you fit the image we want," the manager said. Image. Not skill, not experience. Image. He left the building with rejection burning like fire. But he remembered his father's words. Fight with truth. So he built. He studied harder, worked longer, took the jobs no one wanted, stacked each a small victory until one day the same people who had dismissed him were forced to shake his hand. The memory dimmed with the sound of a clock ticking in that office. In the present, it overlapped with the sharp tick of the airport departures board flipping numbers. 32. A different city. A different humiliation. He had been denied service at a luxury hotel, card questioned, reservation doubted. The manager had looked him dead in the eye and said, "This place isn't for you." He had stood in that lobby, calm as ever, but inside something shifted. That night he made himself a vow. Never again. Never again would he explain, justify, or prove himself just to exist in spaces he already belonged. He would let truth carry the weight. He would let silence work like steel. And when the time came, when the world tried again to humiliate him publicly, he would not shout. He would simply reveal. That vow lived inside him still. The officer's hand lingered on his arm, light but firm, enough to signal, "You don't belong." The aggressor saw it and stepped closer, seizing the moment. "Finally," he sneered. "Now drag him out so the rest of us can board. This isn't his world." That last phrase hung heavier than the fluorescent light above them. This isn't his world. Gasps broke. A few passengers muttered openly now. "That's too far. This is wrong." But the aggressor only pressed harder, his voice sharpened to a cruel point. "Stand up, man. You're wasting everyone's time. Or do you need me to call your boss to buy you a coach seat?" Phones raised higher. Red lights blinked. Every word recorded. The black man turned slowly, eyes steady. He didn't yank away from the officer. He didn't raise his voice. He simply asked one question. "Are you sure?" The aggressor blinked, thrown for just a second. The gate fell into a tense silence. No boarding announcements, no seat numbers. Just the low hum of the crowd, the static buzz of fluorescent lights, and the steady glow of camera phones. Every second stretched thin. The aggressor folded his arms, smirking, though his eyes flicked nervously at the phones pointed his way. The gate agent cleared her throat. "Security, please escort him." But her words faltered, because the black man was reaching into his bag. Slowly, calmly, deliberately. Every eye followed. The officer stiffened. The aggressor smirked wider. "Go on, show us your fake ID." Instead, he pulled out a slim leather folder. Opened it. Placed something flat and official on the counter. The gate agent leaned forward and froze. The badge glinted under the fluorescent light. Not a frequent flyer card, not a random ID, but a laminated, gold-edged credential. The logo at the top read Horizon Airlines Executive Operations. The name beneath, Marcus Carter, Chief Executive Officer. The silence shattered. Passengers gasped, some audibly cursing. Phones zoomed in on the badge, the name, the title. The black man spoke finally, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner. "You asked for ID. Here it is." The aggressor's smirk dissolved, his face paling like paper left in the rain. What? You're—" His words crumbled. The officer withdrew his hand instantly. The gate agent's cheeks flushed deep red. She stumbled backward, mumbling something no one could hear. Marcus Carter lifted the credential calmly, then tucked it back into his folder. His eyes swept the room, steady, unreadable. "I am Marcus Carter, CEO of Horizon Airlines, and the owner of the very seat you tried to take from me." Phones shook in astonishment. Passengers whispered. One woman clapped once, then stopped, unsure if it was allowed. The aggressor tried to stammer. I didn't know." "That's the point," Marcus said. His voice cut through the air like a judge's verdict. "You didn't need to know who I was. You just needed to respect a paying passenger." The gate area shifted like a courtroom turning. Every eye was no longer on Marcus. They were on the aggressor. On the staff who had stayed silent. The officer cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, sir, we—" Marcus raised a hand. The officer stopped mid-sentence. "Stand down," Marcus said evenly. "This flight will not leave until we address what just happened here." The gate agent looked stricken. "Sir, please, it was a misunderstanding." "No," Marcus replied, calm but cutting. "It was a choice." Passengers murmured in agreement. Phones filmed openly now. A teenager whispered, "This is going viral." Marcus turned to the aggressor who stood frozen, his platinum ticket useless in his shaking hand. "You will not be boarding this flight." The man's mouth opened, closed. No sound came. His face burned with humiliation as the crowd's silence pressed on him heavier than any word. Marcus's final line landed like a gavel. "Respect is not optional, not on my airline." The gate fell into a hush again as Marcus Carter turned, calm as ever, toward the stunned gate staff. "You kept my boarding pass," he said evenly to the first agent. "You called security instead of scanning policy. That's not training failure, that's judgment failure." The woman stammered, "Sir, You're relieved," Marcus cut gently but firmly. He glanced at her badge. "Effective immediately." Her hands trembled as she reached for her headset, sliding it off with shaking fingers. To the second agent, the one who'd whispered about escalation, Marcus said, "You followed along. You didn't stop it. Complicity has consequences." The officer who had touched him shifted nervously. Marcus didn't glare, didn't raise his voice. "You made contact with a passenger whose ticket scanned valid. That report will go to your supervisor. Whether you keep your badge depends on what you do next time." He didn't humiliate them with shouting. He let silence and presence do the work. The aggressor stood off to the side, pale, sweating, clutching his useless ticket. Marcus gave him only a single glance. "You'll find another flight tomorrow. Economy." The applause started hesitant. One pair of hands, then two, then a swell. Soon the gate was filled with clapping, murmurs of support, even shouts of, "That's right!" A woman in a red scarf spoke up loudly. "I filmed everything." He showed his pass, and they still tried to push him out. "This needs to be seen." Another passenger, an older man with silver hair, raised his phone high. "We all saw the truth. You handled it with dignity, sir." Marcus inclined his head slightly. Not boastful, just acknowledgement. A teenage girl near the back whispered into her live stream, "That's the CEO. He just denied that guy boarding for discrimination." Her comments blew up instantly, hearts and exclamations flying across the screen. But in that moment, the online reaction wasn't what mattered. It was the quiet shift in the room itself. No one looked away anymore. They were standing with him. The boarding doors opened again. Passengers began filing through, calmer now, as if something had been set right before takeoff. Marcus Carter waited until the very end. He picked up his worn leather bag, adjusted the strap on his shoulder, and stepped forward. At the threshold of the jet bridge, he paused, turned back. His eyes swept the gate one last time. The stunned staff, the pale aggressor, the passengers who had spoken, filmed, and whispered truth into the silence. He spoke only once more, his voice calm, low, but unforgettable. "Respect should never depend on what you wear or what you look like, only on the fact that you're here." Then he walked down the jet bridge, his footsteps steady, the sound echoing like a closing argument. The passengers followed, quiet but lighter now, carrying with them not just tickets, but a story they would retell again and again. The gate quieted, but the lesson echoed long after the boarding sign switched to "Final Call." What happened at Gate C-12 wasn't just about one insult. It was about what people assume when they look at someone and think they already know their worth. It was about silence from those who should have stepped in sooner. It was about how bias can hide behind policy until someone refuses to let it pass unnoticed. Respect should never depend on clothes, on titles, on appearances. It should be given because dignity is the baseline, not a privilege to be earned. Marcus Carter never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His calm cut deeper than shouting ever could. In that stillness, he reminded everyone watching that true power doesn't come from position. It comes from principle. And maybe the most telling detail? The passengers. At first, whispers, then recordings, then voices. Slowly, they chose to stand on the right side of the moment. Because justice isn't just about the person humiliated or the person in power. It's about the bystanders, and whether they choose silence or solidarity. If you were standing there that day, phone in hand, what would you have done? Filmed quietly? Looked away? Or spoken up? The answer says as much about the future as it does about the present. If you were there at Gate C-12, if you heard that insult, saw that ticket scanned green, and watched the crowd go silent, what would you have done? Would you have stepped forward? Would you have raised your voice? Or would you have waited for someone else to act? These are the questions that matter, because dignity isn't protected by titles alone. It's protected by people, ordinary passengers, bystanders, witnesses, who choose to stand tall when silence is easier. Marcus Carter didn't need applause. He didn't need viral videos. He needed one thing, fairness. And in the end, that's exactly what he claimed. Not just for himself, but for everyone watching. So now it's your turn. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in that moment? Share this story if you believe respect should never be optional. And subscribe because the next story we bring you will stop you in your tracks just like this one did. Because injustice doesn't schedule itself. It shows up in lobbies, in lines, at boarding gates. Anywhere silence makes room for it. And the only way it ends is if someone refuses to move. Until next time, stay aware, stay brave, and never underestimate the power of standing still with truth.